Hi everyone, you're about to watch an interview with myself and Philip Kinsella. Now, Philip Kinsella brings together several theoretical applications concerning what the UFO phenomena may represent, and will also explore his own alien abduction, which occurred in the winter of 1989, and examining both old and new cases alike. Now, Philip draws upon several conclusions as to what we may be up against. Philip is both a clairvoyant medium and a UFO investigator and author. He also won the British Mediumship Award in Portsmouth, England, and he joins me today to discuss his abduction and so much more. Now, just a quick mention of my sponsor, Keen, who is a trusted network of talented spiritual advisors who are dedicated to empowering lives by helping people discover answers to their most pressing questions, gaining closure, finding purpose in life, and much more. So just use the link trykeen.com/Kevin or go to the description below to click the link. Now, just a quick side note, if you could support the Kevin Moore Show by using the donation email paypal@themoreshow.com, your support would mean the world in expanding my talk show. So this interview is two parts. So Philip Kinsella, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Kevin, for having me on your show. It's amazing. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm interested to do this interview with you. I've listened back to a few previous interviews that you've done as well, and I've got to say, I thanks to Philip Mantle for putting us in contact with each other, because I don't think I would have maybe have heard of you unless that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm grateful that he has, because I think it's interesting what you're doing. So,
Yes.
if I was to ask you to begin with, what is your purpose? How would you answer that right now?
Well, it's a very complex question. Purpose, that's something I've always been looking for within life. What purpose is there to life? Why are we here? What is the meaning of life? And what I found was that when I questioned this when I was very young, asking where I was before I was born to my mum, the answer came out in the womb, but I kind of like knew on a deeper level that there had to be more than just the birthing cycle, living a life and then dying, and consciousness nullified completely. That used to shock me. And what I found in later life was that certain paranormal experiences, or what we call paranormal experiences, had affected not just myself, but also my identical twin brother. And one of those was part and due with our maternal grandmother when we were 13 years of age, with a cylindrical type UFO, well, sphere really, silver, that came over. And, you know, in those days, back in the early 80s, no one spoke about death, and they didn't speak about UFOs. And if they did, then it was all, you know, ridicule or pushed under the carpet. But I'm a man, hopefully, of facts, if we can call them facts. And I've always tried to keep myself on the straight and narrow with regards to legitimacy, honesty, and respect. So that's why I got involved in certain aspects of the paranormal. But certainly in 1989, in the winter of 1989, I had what most people would call an alien abduction. And that was an experience that kind of like blew open a new mindset of what we may be dealing with, because the way that most of the public were talking about this was as though it was happening on a physical level of integration. And I found that through my experience, it was anything but. Part of it was physical and the other part non-physical. And I think that's what led me then on a crusade to try and find out what we're dealing with.
Okay, great. Thank you for that introduction there, because that sort of sets up where we're going to go with this interview as well. So right now, your sort of day-to-day job is mediumistic sort of skills, giving people readings. What you tell us? What are you doing right now with that type of work?
that is what I do, and I never wanted or intended to be a medium. And this is something that occurred some years after the 1989 episode. And I've often questioned whether or not the episode that happened had somehow opened a part of the psyche that's normally closed, or an awareness. And I had gone to see a medium when my maternal grandmother had sadly passed over. And during that time, I am ashamed to say that I didn't believe in mediums, although my grandmother was psychic. Sounds contradictory in its nature, but I kind of like understood that with my grandmother. But I actually saw a good psychic who used to work for the FBI in America, who worked on cold soul cases. And when I'd gone in to see her, she knew me, even though she didn't. She was bringing information out and talking about my life, about the UFO event that I'd had that no one else at that point really knew about, and also of me being a medium. And when she'd finished the reading with me, after 2 hours, I got in my car, I put my head down on the steering wheel and I wept. And it was like this weight had lifted off of my shoulders. So I then wanted to understand the application of what we call discarnate communication. And I thought, well, here's a guy who's interested in UFOs, and now he's talking to the dead. I thought my reputation would go right down the pan, but I wanted to find the truth. I wanted to find answers that a lot of people, researchers, were asking, but a lot of the general populace weren't. And this is why I got involved in trying to understand or establishing how the brain works, how consciousness works. And this led into areas of the human soul, of what we call the afterlife, and the journey thereafter.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's a path that a lot of us take sometimes. And, well, a lot more of us are taking, shall I say, in these times. Just looking more into, what's my purpose? Why am I here? Kind of questions, maybe. Gosh, where do we start with your work? Okay, so, with your family then, okay, so you said your grandmother had the mediumistic skill set. Did your mother have that at all? Did it?
No.
But you did?
No, I did. I was I am a twin, an identical twin. I'm the oldest of my brother by 7 minutes. And what was really strange was that when I had gone to see the medium, and she'd clarified information that could not have got from here, I kept thinking, well, how is she doing this? How is she able to get this information? And a few years later, a few people had died. And this really shocked me. And the question again of death came into the fray, not just with ufology, but also the afterlife. And I went back to the medium. She foresaw this, and then she started to train me. And it's not just a case of, most people have this idea of sitting in a circle and, going into some kind of meditation. I was very hard with myself in trying to understand the applications of discarnate communication. What I found was that it wasn't me asking for the suggestions. I found that I was just a conduit, rather like your mobile phone that's a physical apparatus, and it has a signal running through it that's unique to you, that's personal to you. And we can't see the signaling, but we know that the signaling is broken down to a language that we can understand when we read it on the device that we carry. So I kind of thought the human brain must work in the same way, but for many it's been closed down, or that part of consciousness has been programmed so that we're not able to facilitate these other marvels that people consider them, that are dormant.
Yes, absolutely. So right now, if someone wanted a reading from you, how would you give that reading in a sense? How does it work for you in a session?
Well, basically, I would just ask for a simple yes or a no. I never feed. And what's interesting is the feeling or sensations you get, because with clairvoyance, it is not as clear as people say. Clairvoyance, for instance, means clear seeing. It's anything but. It's almost an impression. And the only way I can describe it to you is that, for instance, if you were the medium and I was the departed, and I asked you to see the image of, a doctor, then you can see that. So my study of that suggested that those on the other side were somehow impressing images upon the consciousness, using the library of the mind of the medium to pull out anything that the medium can understand that may be related to the person having the reading. We have brilliant readings, and sometimes there are some people that we can't read for. Does that make the medium a bad medium? No, I don't think so. It could be something to do with the energy or the attitude of the person that you're reading for. So this is how I worked. And, it's very strange to try and cram it all in very quickly. But it's an ongoing process and something that we are still developing. Every time that the clairvoyance starts or it links into, we are surprised by what we get. And yet one of the things is that I have been tested, I've been tried and tested, it doesn't bother me, but you'll find that every time you do it, you're still shivering and shaking for the next reading, thinking, I hope the information comes through. And I found out that we are just mere vessels for consciousness, that other forms of consciousnesses are able to interlink with us as mobile phone network systems. I know it's a very simple analogy, but it's the best way to try and explain to people how consciousness works. And this then led into another theoretical application of not just the dying or what we call the deceased, but a lot of what we call paranormal activity that seems to occur. And of course, I was very interested in looking into that and researching into that. And it pulled me back again to the event in winter of 1989 that had occurred, which kind of like pulled most of the pieces together within my later life. Because the medium said to me, she said, when I'd seen her, she said, you're going to bridge the gap between the psychic and UFO phenomena. And at that point, I had no idea what she had been talking about. So this is our understanding of the soul. We go through a process, we believe, of living and dying. But I believe that what happens is that when the soul from what we call the other side chooses to incarnate within the mother, it goes through a birthing cycle. And I believe also that that real part of you that is coming into form, gestation, is carrying the other memories from past lives or those on the other side. But when we come into this realm, when we actually enter this realm, the memories start to, subside because this reality takes over. So I believe that we are recording our life experience from birth to death. And I was wondering, well, why? Why are we here? Why are we going through all this madness and craziness and loving and hating and killing and all this type of thing, diseases? What's the point? But then I thought, well, what if it was possible that we are all containers that's building memories and experiences from birth to death, and that when we die, the real part of you, the soul, people call it, consciousness, if you will, when it returns back to what we call the other side, that those memories and experiences maybe are fed into the bigger process of creation, and that we expand upon this process of creation, recycling or whatever you want to call it, like a computer programmer that programs a computer game. First of all, it creates a platform for the person to walk on and experience through. Unfortunately, in a computer game, you can go back and start again. In life, it's not that simple.
Wow, no. But, more and more conversations nowadays with big names, scientists in the field, where they talk about the holographic or the simulated universe.
Yes.
And that's some damn interesting conversations when you think, well, what if this was someone else's simulation? Do you know what I mean?
Or if it's something that's programmed within this physical matrix, within the organ, the brain itself, as a platform that we experience this reality within. And this is interesting, even though that you're up against a lot of people because you have no proof. People always want proof of this and proof of that, but they're quite happily able to listen and believe whatever's told to them on the television set. So we find ourselves within a corner, but I always say to people, I don't need to prove anything. I have my own proof because I have had the experiences, and because I am basing most of those experiences upon theoretical content of what we may be experiencing on multiple levels of reality. And this is the holy grail, like many other esteemed minds and researchers. You mentioned Philip Mantle earlier. He's a mentor and a brilliant man, and he's been very kind to me and my brother. And with regards to the work, although as researchers we have our different opinions, we nevertheless respect those opinions. But we are of the complete understanding that we are dealing with a phenomenon, not just the life after death, but the UFO phenomenon that still eludes researchers and has done since the inception of Roswell. I mean, UFOs are around a lot longer than that, but Roswell confirmed the conspiracy or the theory behind the higher establishments then covering their tracks to sway public attention to say it's not real.
So, if I was to say to you then, with your latest book, You, the Public Deceived, The Grand UFO Deception, what is the most important message of that book? And also, why that book?
Well, for years, I had gone through ridicule with regards to the experience that I had back in 1989 that I won't go into because it's too long. And also because when you've been through a traumatic experience, you're trying to understand it. And years later, I met with many brilliant people who helped me understand that I wasn't going crazy, that you had an experience that left physical marks and changed you to some degree. Does that make me special? No, we're all special in my eyes. But I wanted the truth. I wanted the ultimate truth of what we are dealing with. And the thing that annoyed me more than anything was the establishments of power, not necessarily the governments, because they come and go, but the establishments of power, those higher echelons who hide behind masks and fake names, who are never seen and never heard, never known. And, you know, dealing with a lot of the good people that I had met and the amazing, incredible cases that they had recorded fueled me to write this book, You, the Public Deceived, The Grand UFO Deception. And I also wanted to apply a new theoretical model with regards to the greys, because that is what I experienced back in 1989. And I wanted to try and understand what the greys were, where they come from, and why they were doing what they were doing. They seemed so famous within the UFO arena. But then I found myself at a difficult situation, because you were having a lot of people that were talking about their love and light experiences and a lot of people talking about their negative experiences. I am not in any way disputing the love and light experiences. I fully respect that. But I can only speak from experience and the rawness of that so-called abduction. And I say so-called because we still don't understand what it is. But I think using theoretical models helps us in some areas to try and formulate a conclusion. It does not necessarily mean that I'm right. I respect all researchers' work. But it's important that we think outside the box, because we haven't been able to gain much ground by continuously understanding that UFOs are physical nuts and bolts hardware. Yes, when they come into our reality, they perhaps bring themselves into our field frequency and matched by that frequency. Rather like signals going into a mobile phone, it becomes a reality when at first you can't see it. So this led me to writing the book, and I had the most amazing help from good souls like Kathleen Marden, whose uncle and auntie were Betty and Barney Hill, Peter Robbins, Terry Lovelace, and many others, Earl Grey Anderson, who were, quite happy to help me. And, most of these people are with the MUFON networks, and, a lot of them are, no strangers to the UFO phenomenon. So I wanted to write the book because I wanted to try and draw parallels to the fact that we are being deceived, and still today. It's incredible.
But do you think it's a sort of deception where really, were you there at the high levels of government and military, they still haven't really got that much of an understanding what the hell this is?
Yes, and I think also even if they did, I think it would be very hard for them to explain to the public. People talk about disclosure. Well, that's going to be very tricky, because how are you going to explain to the public that yes, UFOs are real, and aliens, most notably the Greys, not all of them, are able to abduct you, perform experiments on you, you have missing time, and bring you back. So basically what they're saying is we're not in control. So you know what it's like when you inform the public if there's a water shortage or a fuel shortage. You have chaos. So I don't understand how this disclosure will come about, because there does seem to be a very small clandestine operation with regards to people knowing about this. It's so securely secreted, no one will get to it. And it's all whispers or half-truths, but we want the truth, and that's what we've been fighting for. And on another note, very quickly, I am part of NUFORS, which is the National UFO Reporting Service, because that was created by Nigel Ross. And we wanted recently to create a network where reports came into our hands rather than the governments or the military. So I wrote to Parliament, I won't say who I wrote to, informing them that we are created this group, and that, you know, with truth, honesty, and integrity, we bring everything to the table, everything that we know. We want to share this. Can you help us to form some form of understanding with this? And I was met with silence, which is was nothing new there.
Before we get into the UFO abduction, so just to clear a few things up. So, yes, okay, so your understanding of how you've connected sort of spirituality to the experience that you went through, what we call the UFO nuts and bolts, connecting that with the spiritual side. That's more common nowadays. There's a lot more people going down that road, sort of integrating both sides of those together. But even the idea that we're a soul having a human experience, it's a big thing for someone. Some people, even that step, isn't it, to take on that responsibility that it gives, I suppose, for seeing life from that perspective.
Yes, because we have been programmed. And, it's like programming a computer. I'm not saying that the brain is, a computer. It's organic in nature. But certainly, the content of the programming has told us what is history, what is reality, and what is not. And I think a lot of people find that hard to swallow. But you'll find, incredibly, that through the research of people like Dr. Peter Fenwick and, and so forth, is that when we have, experienced or gone through some kind of research and experience through a near-death experience or out-of-body experience or remote viewing, which is slightly different, proves that consciousness survives beyond the flesh. It's able to, move forward. I understand how most people can't accept that. And also going back to the abduction and also psychic field, in 1996, I was credited with the revolutionary theory with regards to that, and that was published. But of course, time moves on and people put bits together, don't they? But certainly I think and feel that with regards to the life after death issue, yes, it will be quite hard to swallow. But let's just put it this way. We are all of us going to die, every single one of us. And that is something I think a lot of the public can't accept. And I fully understand that. But the time will come when we will make our departure. It's only at that point, even for the most devout, those devout enough not to believe in life after death, atheists, they still come to an understanding that something is occurring and something is happening. So I don't understand what the taboo is. Why are we so afraid to admit there's life after death? And why are we so afraid to admit that UFOs exist? It doesn't make any sense to me, because it's almost like, well, why can't we question this? It's happening. So what is this all about? Why are we not being told?
Well, I think for the UFO side as well, I think, a lot of international governments have looked into the UFO phenomena, but those research projects don't always publicly continue for very long, right? They may do in the background, right? And then sort of citizen journalists take the reins of picking up a microphone and becoming a broadcast journalist, and their own bias and their own insanity and disinformation that they want to put out there gets mixed into what potentially is really going on, and it becomes a bit of a muddle sometimes.
Yes. Oh, yes, absolutely. And that's what we find as researchers. that we have to sift the wheat from the chaff. Very difficult, because we try to we only deal with genuine cases, with truth. But sometimes we can find ourselves, going down roads that we find uncomfortable. But we have to face these roads. We have to confront them. This is something important. So, anyone can claim anything. And it's very hard because we have no proof, physical proof. But we can always normally tell through the sincerity of the individual and how they're operating within this life, if I can use that word quite crudely. It's the only words I can find.
Yes, but I mean, obviously, this field, be it the spiritual, metaphysical field and the UFO field, does attract a lot of people with mental health issues, right?
Yeah, oh yes, absolutely.
And it's also, trying to see past, what's the right way to put this? Yeah, it's it gets foggy, doesn't it, when that's in the mix as well. So there's people having those issues that want to claim a story that's not true, or whatever it is that they're claiming. And yeah, that's difficult, because people, if they come across, they're well spoken, they seem to be logical, and you're not going to know whether they've got a screw loss or not. Do you know what I mean? Time will tell that, right? But it's difficult, isn't it? Because then some of these people with the bigger platforms are the loopiest ones.
Well, I can't claim anything myself personally. I can only bring to the table what I have understood and what I've learned and what I think and feel. Whether or not people believe what happened to me, it's neither here nor there. It doesn't really bother me. I've said before, I'd rather not go back down that road. But what's interesting is that when I had gone back down that road, another researcher called Pierre Sabak had discovered some interesting connections with regards to what happened, which opens up more of our understanding of what we may be dealing with on a psychological level. It doesn't mean to say that, the experience was UFO related. I've always said that we still don't know what we're dealing with. The force or this energy seems as ancient and as old as the stars. And, it's been in our folklore. So I agree with you there, Kevin, most definitely. You find yourself in a minefield of contradictions, of lies, but also many truths. And we understand the frustration of the individual when they are being honest, when they are being truthful. That's what we try to sift through and understand. And it's people like Philip Mantle and Chris Evers and many others who have been there to assist and help, in understanding, because I still can't tell you what it was that happened to me. I can only report the facts as they occurred, and they have never changed. And this is the really horrible part, because it's almost as if you yourself have to justify the means to the ends of what happened. And I never wanted that to happen. I never wanted the story to break. That was none of my doing.
Well, thank God.
That was when it occurred.
Yeah, thank God you've got a loving family, though. Twin brother that supports your work. I'm sure your sister has, if she's been in the background, she's been there. Do you know what I mean? That's nice to have that, right? And I know they support you now as well. Do you not have a talk show with your twin brother still?
Yes, Twin Souls. Yeah, with the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Yes, we interview researchers and experiencers or whatever subject matter that they are involved in. We have them come on board. They are screened. So we have had a few people whose claims have been rather dubious. I think we all have that. We all find that. But it's in our quest for people to, a release valve for them to speak and to bring forward their ideas, which are important because we embrace all people's ideas.
Absolutely. Where is that podcast based? Is there a website for that, or?
It's within, it's done through the Paranormal UK Radio Network, and that is with Irene Allen and Mark Johnson. And they deal with all of the distribution of that through the podcasts, yes, and that type of thing.
Well, we'll put the links in the description below, and for your books as well. So you've never had your own website as such?
I did, but it was becoming expensive, so we are redeveloping a new one. So yeah, so that's something I'm going to be working on. I've been working on the project that's just come out, and I've been working on a few other things, and I have another book to work on, another UFO book to work on that I'm currently in the process of starting. So it's been a bit heavy going. Yeah.
I think the best thing to do is maybe if we give your email address out. So if people want to have a reading with you, um, would you be okay with that?
Well, they can get me on Facebook. They just have to PM me on Facebook. And my niece Charlie, she deals with all of that because we share the Facebook. It was one of the easiest ways because we found that if it was on phone or then we were chasing one to the other or to the other. But that's on that. But as I said, I've never really advertised.
What
It's
is your
something I've
Facebook
never.
address?
It's just Philip Kinsella, Philip with one L and Kinsella. And you can find me there. You can see wearing the glasses.
Yeah, well, that website is coming up on the lower third right now as we speak. Okay, so that's where, and it's in the description below if you want to link it down. You go down to the link down there as well. It's there. So, yeah, well, I'm glad that you've had the family support there. What did it do to your ego to be ridiculed so badly? I believe just in the UK national TV.
Yes, that's right. Yes. Well, it was some of them were really great. I mean, they were pre-recorded, so you couldn't really cut across to what you were saying and speaking about. And the mid section of the experience that I had been omitted from my publisher from my previous book, Belief, because he felt that it was too raw within its content. So they removed it. So, well, after I'd had several media connection links, it disillusioned me. And not only that, but also through public ridicule, which I had to suffer. Now, most people will say, sitting in an armchair and not understanding, well, what a load of rubbish, what a liar, this, that, and the other. I think I've had every unimaginable thing written. I did a conference not long ago, and I had the same thing, vile, but I had to man up and try and get through that. It did hurt. And I think, not only dealing with a subject matter that most people believe is mere fantasy or delusion, or worse even, lies, but then also having to sift through a lot of the ridicule. Where I used to work, I had people coming in and pointing and saying, oh, there's the man that, went on aboard a spaceship. And so you had to live through this. And with regards to the ego, I was shattered and broken. But throughout the prevailing years, I grew stronger and more resilient and more determined than ever to get to the heart of the mystery.
Right, and people will understand the story better when we explain it in detail soon, and why the ridicule was there as well. But what is really what part of you is pushing you to want to tell this story? Why is it so meaningful for you to get this out there?
Well, because from my perspective, we are more than flesh and blood, that we have been lied to by a system that tells us that you are anything but. You are a working robot, you're a mechanism. You're programmed to think a certain way. You toil the soil, you pay your taxes, you don't ask any questions, then you die. Anything to do with the UFO phenomenon or the afterlife is to be squashed or held in what many will believe would be some type of religion, as it were, airy fairy stuff that can't be proven or touched.
Okay. So let me stop you there. Sorry to do this, but then what world would you see if the opposite was sort of more allowed to come into society to be openly talked about? Not openly talked about, but it was sort of included in society that that potentially we are this thing called a soul, and what ramifications would that have to the way we live our lives now, do you think?
I think people will change. I think people will change because they'll understand that this isn't the beginning, middle, and end. The greed and corruption may end because if we have a greater understanding of, the spirit or the soul, as it were, the continuation into the afterlife, your progression beyond this sphere of reality, I think it would change a great many people. But unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen because we have such diversity within those religious sects, and all are, contained or restricted within their thinking. No one is allowed to think outside the box. And when you do, you're persecuted, for them anyway. So what hope do we have at the moment? But if we did live in an ideal world, which I doubt very much we will, um, I believe that people will have a greater respect for not only each other and how they live, but also the world in which we live and the environment in which we live in. And I think at that point, people laugh and joke about conscious elevation. But, by having a greater understanding of the knowledge that these things are real, in my case, I know they're real, has changed me into a more empathic person, a more understanding individual, a more caring person.
But what does it mean in the sense that, okay, when we look up at the universe or the sky, just look up at the sky at nighttime, right? If it's a clear sky. And, or just even the TV programs nowadays, right? You see the vastness of the infiniteness of infiniteness, right? The potential of it, right? That shifts me sometimes just to think, well, there could well be something out there. There must be something out there, right? And even just to the idea of the infiniteness, you know what I mean? Where did the infiniteness come from if something's just infinite, right? We can't even get that in our mind. But a lot of us are just dealing with day-to-day things on planet Earth, right? We're not always thinking about that, yeah? Do you think that we are at the stage we're at as a global consciousness, in a sense? Because that's just where where we are. We haven't all woken up to the idea that we're potentially more than our body. It's okay. Souls are desperate to come down here to have all sorts of experience. So let's not ruin the playground just yet. Don't end the simulation just yet. Do you know what I mean? We want this as a soul, to have the hard times. We don't all want to walk around as a Jesus figure. Do you know what I mean? But I think what the spiritual side does, in a sense, or looking at this side, is it at least makes the day-to-day things more bearable sometimes, or at least it allows you to potentially become your best version in this lifetime, in a sense, to see the infiniteness of what's inside you. You know what I mean? Of what you're able to really do, right? When you see this greater spark in you.
Yes.
But, it's almost like we knew when we incarnated here, if that's what we've done, right? That this was going to be the result of it, the sort of self-imposed amnesia, right? So we must have been like, get on with it. This is what we want. We want to enter this program, in a sense. You know what I mean? But I suppose it's where we leave it. Are we going to try to wake up and leave it in a better, or maybe it's not leave it in a better place. Maybe we don't come here to change the world. We come here to change ourselves.
Yes, and I believe that most definitely. I think it's we who are changing. I don't think that any of us can change the world. I think that's nigh impossible. But I think we change within ourselves, and I think we develop. And this is the really cranky thing about it. I love the analogy you gave about looking into the universe, and I've often wondered, is it eternal? If it's eternal, does it go into higher dimensions of reality? Is space warped? We don't know. But my understanding is that perhaps we're dealing with something that is inbuilt, that has to be there for us to be projected, for us to experience in this reality. I think that on a soul level, when we do depart this earth plane, and we return back to source, whatever you want to call it. We have to be very careful how we name it. I think then we open up to a revelation of ourselves on a deeper level or a more personal level, that we understand that, there is more to us than we are here. And I also believe, although many years ago I rejected the hypothesis that the soul is not just human, we look at things in a very humane way. Maybe the earth is one platform among many that the soul has incarnated onto or within. And that, that's why people ask me questions about the afterlife. And I say, well, I can only give them a short version because we don't know much about it. But I say to them that that's a very human question, because when we pass over, that we're stripped of the humane qualities that we have, and we are lifted upwards. And most people who have had a near-death experience continually describe this euphoric state of revelation, and which I find very interesting, very fascinating.
What has your work taught you about the nature of reality? Has it taught you that you are on the right path? The more you do the readings that you do, and you do your spiritual work as well, that it's opened you up to greater and greater
And I would say
Yeah.
no. I really don't know. I mean, although I feel that I'm doing the right thing, it's what I love doing. It's a passion, it's a drive. I can't explain
It's your purpose.
why I am driven. Yes, but on the long term of where I'm going, I have no idea. I just aspire towards the truth. That's all I want. And people say, okay, so if you had the truth and you got it, what would you do with it? It's not as simple as that. I never felt like I belonged on this planet. I always felt like I was the odd one out. And I think, and it's not because some psychologists will come along and say, it's because you think that these things happen, you want them to happen. No, it's not. I think that there are, those souls on this planet who yearn for the change or the transformation. My dream is to communicate with greys on a one-to-one level without it being hidden within the shadows, understanding their reality, where they come from,
Yeah, but are you
and
really ready for that, do you think? I mean, wouldn't you just freak the F out? You say you want that, but are you really deeply ready for
maybe, well, maybe not as deeply, but I think, they tend to get you when you're unarmed. But certainly, I've always had this dream of understanding God, the nature of reality, the universe, and the really cranky thing about all of this, if I may use the word gently, people will think this is because when you've had an experience, or you have had experiences, because it's not the only time that UFOs have been seen. The last ones were on the 9th of April 2016. They were filmed for my niece as they were coming to us. They've been witnessed by other people. When you go through that experience, when you've had it, it tells you categorically that there is something not right with the world in which we live, because you are exploring and experiencing this reality that people are telling you can't possibly exist, and yet you are experiencing it. So I think that a part of your soul burns or yearns also to know what that reality is, because you've been touched by it, tainted by it, and you want more. I always say when you have your first taste of a UFO encounter, it's like a drug. You can't get enough of it. You want more and more. But, on a practical level, if I use the word gently practical, we deal with some people who are, with the grays every 5 minutes of the days, or having this experience every moment. It's not like that. So it is a very delicate balance that we're walking, very delicate indeed.
Do you think the blame that we give to our governments and the blame that we give to secret societies potentially of not wanting to reveal this truth is actually a reflection or a projection of our blame or denial in ourselves, of not wanting to see the truth within ourselves?
I think that perhaps that the establishments of power have demonstrated that they are able to cover things up. And it's not just with the UFO phenomena, and not everything is a conspiracy theory either. And as you know, that's a psychological weapon to turn the finger of doubt upon the inquiring mind. However, I believe that perhaps a lot of this is happening now because there has been a suppression of human consciousness. And because human consciousness has been suppressed for so long, the other alternative realities are somehow forcing them way through. And remember also, interaction is achieved on a very personal level of the psyche. Although we have a lot of patterns which indicate that, a person goes through this or that when they've either been abducted or see a UFO, the experience integrates on a very personal level and changes that individual. So I believe that a lot of people now, I agree with you, are waking up to this reality, as difficult as it is for many others to accept. But people say the proof's in the pudding. But what's interesting about this phenomenon is that it must be operating on higher frequencies of awareness or alternative dimensions, because it entwines with our world and then can depart quite easily, leaving nothing but memories, as it were.
Absolutely, yes. So you're saying there is that maybe the space or the alternative dimensions that they're coming from, or whatever it is, right, is closer to the source energy of where our souls come from. It's not that level, but it just goes to show that it's possible that when you just tune that dial a little bit, which we can't see sometimes. We can't even see radio frequency, right?
Yes.
But I think David Icke spoke about this before, and I know you're a supporter of his. But when you just tune that dial a little bit, other realities are just right next to us, and who knows? Maybe they're cloaked in a sense. Maybe they're here now in those other frequencies, but we just don't
Yes.
perceive of them.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, as I've said before, the brain is an amazing component, organic component. It, to my mind, is not only there to facilitate the functioning of the body, but also facilitates consciousness. I used to believe that we were inside here because we were told we're in here, and when we die, this dies. We found that many other people have found that this is not the case, that the consciousness seems to surround the body. People call it the aura, the energy centers. And what's interesting is that the more that someone opens up to a belief, that belief becomes a reality within their normal state of conscious awareness. For instance, the passages that if you're narrow-minded, then you're narrowing the field frequency of awareness coming through, which means you won't get it, you won't see it. You also get astronauts, interestingly here, just a quick, completely different thing altogether, but astronauts that have gone out into space have said that their thinking has changed. And in some cases, their DNA has changed, their body, their body's changed, the way they feel, because they've been taken away from the normal processing of the timelines on the Earth plane. So what I'm saying here is that the brain is merely the appliance to receive information or shut that information down or open up to it. And this is why many years ago I used to be, I used to think that channels were crazy. No, now I'm not ashamed to say, I'm glad to say that we're understanding that the modulator is here. This is the receiver. And this is perhaps how these alternative realities are able to interact with individual coming in through their energy centers and interacting on a physical level that seem and will appear physical to them, no different from a near-death experience or an abduction, as it were.
Many channel texts, and I know you've read the Seth material, and Seth talks about the UFO phenomena, not a great deal, but it is touched upon in one of the Seth Speaks books. And he talked about the idea of it coming from another, dimension and such. And I think you are right, the sense that, are we creating that reality if we're ready for it? It's like, we create a reality to be, I want to attract this or attract that in my life. That could also be the same as well. Yeah, interesting.
It's how we translate the information. It's how it comes through. We don't know whether or not we are beckoning that in or it is coming in independently on its own way. I mean, the experience I had back in 1989 was no wish from me to experience. And I think a lot of other so-called abductees, as they're known, would say the same thing. I can only recall one of them. There may have been another one. Something strange happened, but I have no memory of what happened afterwards. So I can only, relay facts as I know them, as I believe those facts to be. But certainly, the interesting part is I think that with UFO phenomena also brings in a lot of psychic phenomena, paranormal phenomena, as though the intense energy field of the initial event has left something open. There's a residue of where the original force came from. We don't know. We're still working on those principles or examining them. But it is interesting because it's here and right here. Some people probably don't know how to deal with it and sadly go AWOL, or they have a breakdown, or they suffer from some type of psychological trauma, no different from post-traumatic stress disorder. So we've got to think also of the psychological ramifications that do affect the individual when they have been through something like this.
Yeah. And there's so many people with abduction stories, isn't there?
Yes. What's interesting is that, when I had the experience back in 1989, and I really thought long and hard about it, trying to put the pieces together, why it happened. I still can't connect with that, I'm afraid. But the process employed was very interesting. And this set about me starting to work on a theoretical application. In 1996, I had what is called a download. I was at work at the time, and all of a sudden, the only way that I can explain it, and it's the only time that I've had this experience, was like the answers were there. I remembered at work grabbing a pencil and paper, a pen or paper. I can't remember if it's pen or a pencil, I'm afraid, but I remembered what came through, and I wrote it all down, and I bang this out on a typewriter and set it off, and then it was taken by a UFO magazine, Alien Encounters. But it seemed to put together a piece or a theoretical part to the puzzle of the abduction phenomena, especially where the Greys are concerned. But was that coming from me? No, but I have thought about that. But I thought, no, there's no way that I could have known that. So I give myself no credit to that. It must have come from something else. And it did feel like it was coming from something else. Quite what, I couldn't tell you. Was it a part of my mind opening to a greater reality at that point? I don't know. Were the Greys giving me the information? I don't know. It just was there. And the only way I can explain it was like a flash of insight, a complete revelation. But I'm not clever. I just try to be honest in terms of research, as honest as I can be. And the only way forward is using that honesty. But the theoretical content is very fascinating. I agree with you, because I'm more interested in that now, and in what's going on. So I do agree with you there, most definitely, Kevin. Yes.
I mean, whether or not there's different species, different races, and they've all got different agendas, or maybe there's a sort of universal agenda in a sense. I mean, are they more bothered about the planet than us, some of them? Do you know what I mean? Have they been in our shoes before, and they're observing what we're going through? Why? Are we part of their genetically altered sort of experiment for some of them? These are questions, aren't they? But and there really are not many answers to some of this stuff.
Well, I do believe most definitely also that we, going back into creation and through the ancient, Mesopotamian and Akkadia and all that type of thing, I've always believed, and I haven't been told by anyone or anything, but on a personal level, it made sense to me to assume that the Adama, or whatever you want to call it, whatever they call it in different around the world, sorry, was genetically modified. And I always wondered why it was that as humans, because we're going into some really deep territory here and quite complex, but as humans, we shy from our own sun. We are not adaptable to the environment. And all other parts of nature have not been able to evolve on a conscious level, yet we, as the only species called humans, have. Now, this set about a desire for me to look into this. And I know just as much as many other people, but I do believe that we were genetically modified to bring part of maybe an extraterrestrial part and infused it with the hominid, which was the best suited for the planet. And I do believe that. And if we go back into the teachings and the writings, we discover that there's been an awful lot that's been hidden. So I believe that our Genesis has been hidden, because you get a lot of scientific jargon in trying to establish the links between Homo erectus and Homo sapiens sapien and going onwards. It's almost as if the academic world is trying so hard to piece the pieces together to force it to fit, and it won't. And still we go about our lives like, no, it doesn't matter. So I believe also, yes, that we've been lied to, not only about UFOs and life after death on a huge scale in the media, but also in the scientific establishment.
Well, I just think, that for as long as we sort of have a system where, we have to go out there and get a job because you either work or die, then there are systems set up where they wouldn't want to talk about this because it doesn't make the money. You know what I mean? Right. So imagine a society, obviously, and I know you have before, where it's more of a do what your passion is, and you'll still get paid by whatever the system is, and how that would work. Who knows, right? I mean, they're printing money right now, back when nothing. So we're almost there, right? So imagine what the outcome of that would be like. Almost like then, if we were genetically altered, were we someone's passion, purpose, or were we part of some sort of religious cult? You know what I mean? That was out there that thought that hey, this is what we'll do. Do you know what I mean? This feels the right thing to do to try this experiment out.
I think that we were designed or created for a specific function. Humans are very good in war situations. Humans also they work very well under stress. Many of them do. So it could have been, and I do believe that perhaps we had been created as some type of worker or worker force. And I always say, well, not much has changed today. We're not forced to work by aliens. We're now forced to work by by a hierarchy of humans.
But if something was doing an experiment and it wanted to take away certain aspects of our ability to
yes,
think telepathically, to communicate that way, or to do things that would immediately expand us to know there's something more, and to keep that side of us suppressed so that we could get there ourselves. And it may be some sort of experiment where they thought, well, they're going to be containers, we're going to cut this side off them off, and souls will come into these containers, because it always does.
Yes.
And it's what those souls will need, and they're actually trying to help the evolution of the grander picture of where they think they come from, not just we come from.
Yes, that's right. And I agree, most definitely. We don't have the answers. We can only speculate as to that hypothesis. But certainly the romanticized version, and one I'm more inclined to believe, is that we were genetically modified by extraterrestrials, not necessarily the Greys. They may have been another species of aliens. And this is no more ridiculous than what's going on at the moment, because we find in the records that there were great wars that have even been recorded within biblical text. What makes me laugh is that people are all well and good to believe in angels in the Bible, but if I went up to someone religious and said, "Oh, I've just experienced an angel," they'll look at you as if you're mad. So it's almost as if we've got this thing in us where we're inclined to believe in the past records of events rather than the present ones. And it's almost as if because it's happened, it's okay, we can move forward. I suppose it's rather like in life when we're mapping our memories, the past seems to make more sense, more feeling, more emotion than the present, because we can never stop to appreciate the moment because it's forever moving forward. So, I do agree with you in the sense, most definitely, I've always believed that we were created not by a God. We're probably part of a God force, but this energy is emanated through other beings and, who are then creating other beings and so on and so forth.
And what is God? God is just dog spelt backward. It's just a word. But, if you want to express it that way as the most sacred part of what we truly are, like the love aspect of something bigger,
yes.
But we're not separate from it, but we're a part of it, but we're still kind of almost equal to it. But on this level, it's that amnesia of not knowing that we are and not remembering our greatness, or trying to remember it, right? Which is probably part of the journey, which is not easy. Yes, and I think it's thinking outside the box is almost the way out of the confusion, or at least a way towards love. Maybe that's what we're trying to find. Do you know what I mean? To love ourselves.
Yes, and I agree with you. I understand your line of questioning, going back to when you said, very important question, what are you after? What am I after? And to be honest with you, it feels as though you're driven by a desire or passion to go forward into something that maybe we don't want to fully understand, that there's a part of us that wants to keep on exploring and finding those truths. And when we have it, will we be satisfied? I don't know.
No, I think we then become the next best version of ourselves by doing whatever's next, the biggest part of ourselves. Unless we're stuck on some deep-rooted issues that will come back again and again and again in many different situations with just different people, and and we're not dealing with that crap.
Yes, definitely, yeah.
And that's that's me. I've had to really shake myself up just recently and see that my past patterns have come up again and again and again, and unless I sort them out and face them, and it's very easy to sometimes not fix them straight away, but to at least acknowledge them and see that, well, I guess then I won't be doing that again, because I see the self-sabotaging behavior behind where I've ended up from the initial choice that I made to self-sabotage. I wasn't even realizing I was doing it. You know what I mean? And many other choices that people have made who are locked up in prison right now as we speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or their own prison, maybe, of their own choice, right?
Yes, absolutely,
of the way they think about themselves. But I think just to see themselves as greater than what they've ever acknowledged themselves to be, that the spark is within them, that transformation really does happen, I think, when you work the inner self.
Yes, and thinking about that also, another event that has always happened with me, and I found just recently through one of C.S. Lewis's biographers, the Professor C.S. Lewis, the author of The Lion, the Witch, Wardrobe, and the Screwtape Letters, Narnia, is that he had moments of joy. And when I read what the researcher, his researcher, had written, I was almost astounded, because I would find myself going through periods randomly, or if I can use the word randomly, but when they happened, it felt like everything was coming together. I could be driving the car, reading a book, watching the TV, and all of a sudden that image, the split second of that image would open up the memories of this feeling of euphoria, of worlds coming into worlds, of me recalling those, of being able to understand that it's okay, there's no need to worry, everything's fine, there's a greater reality. And then instantly, when the feeling subsided, it was like all the pieces shattered, and I tried to replicate the feeling and couldn't. But I found that he also had it. And I thought, well, if C.S. Lewis had them, he became disillusioned by them because he couldn't understand them. Then obviously other people have them but didn't speak about them. Again, we're talking about memories that seep through these normal flow of conscious awareness that can sometimes seep through and bring that reality into the fore, and then go out very quickly because it's not processing within the reality that you're in.
If past lives aren't what we think they are and they're happening all now, whatever, right? Or even if they don't exist, but let's just say they do exist, and let's just say that we've done this. How many times have we done this? How many times lifetimes have we been working on our issues, not even knowing we were working on our issues, thinking it was just whatever it was, just an existence, and actually now seeing it from a different perspective, that it is about we're here because are we not stuck in a karmic wheel, but we want to come back because we want to work on ourselves to try to either see the potential of what we could do or what we could do for ourselves and others, or maybe that's just a small part of it, and it's so much more expansive. Do you know what I mean? Who knows?
Well, that's an interesting speculation. I just had a thought then when you said about the UFO book, and of course then you find that it's a lot more complex than that, of what I've been involved in, like many other good people. When you start looking into areas of the soul, of God, of consciousness, of interdimensional realities, of past lives, as it were, future lives, where we are, there are sometimes some points where you feel a little out of your depth. But there's an inward knowing, I believe, within you that tells you it's okay, that you're on the right path, and it's okay to look into these areas, because we're drawn to certain areas that perhaps we have to look into ourselves on a personal level, that somehow will make us as a soul understand a little bit more about what we're looking for, even though we don't have the full picture. Maybe this will become more apparent when we do make our passing back to the other side. That is a very interesting speculation indeed. Yes.
Yeah, and I wonder even if these beings that you've covered in your book, these different stories, and we'll get into some of them. Like I said, there's a lot to talk about, right? Have even made it past spiritually where we're at. Maybe they were just around a lot longer. And
well, yes. You talking, of course, of the Greys. Well, they are the only ones that I experienced. We call them Greys.
we call them Greys, don't we? But are they? Would they call themselves that? Yeah, we call them Greys. That's right. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I thought long and hard about that with regards to the hypothesis of what these beings are or could represent. As I said before, I'm open to all forms of speculation. Clones, robots, space explorers, our gods, our engineers, whatever. I accept and embrace all of them because we don't know. But let's suppose, about the Greys for a moment. I think that's important, and the abduction phenomena itself. But I always say to people, before we ask that question, we have to firstly ask ourselves what we are, what we represent. People look at me blankly and I say, well, what are you? What are you truly? And we've covered most of that already in terms of the soul, of the afterlife, of memories, of past lives, of future lives, of life on the other side, and so on and so forth. Not a very easy subject to tackle. But the Greys appear like clones. And I wondered, about the process of how they're able to abduct someone. This is what fascinated me, because I thought, well, normally the Greys have to be in close proximity with the abductee in order to create this kind of transference from one space into theirs. They're able to take the person through walls and doors. I'm not talking about all Greys here, because we have different factions of humans as well. We're two parts, we're a soul and a body. So what interested me was how the Greys did it. Now, if we look at the abduction phenomena, people are taken through walls and doors. The creatures communicate telepathically with their subject. They have moments of missing time and memory loss in an abduction. In a near-death experience, the person goes through walls and doors. They meet loved ones. They communicate through telepathy. And in each experience, more times than not, within the abductions, they're negative. And in the death experience, more times than not, are positive. But when we look at both sides of this, they both are real to the experiencer. So, for instance, a near-death experiencer who goes through that experience will come back changed, not only sometimes medically, but also, on a deep subconscious level that has made them change the way they see life. In the abduction phenomena, it's slightly different, where they aren't always able to recall the memories of what happened and also are left with physical scars. So my mind's thinking, well, hang on just a minute. When this revelation came in 1996, the Greys appear like specters. Now, let's take another idea. Let's say that, what we've spoken about, you are the natural process of, spiritual evolution. You have come through the womb, the correct channel. You go through, your mother went through the birthing cycle, brought you into the world, and then you live it, and thus it carries on. But let's say that I cloned you in a laboratory, and I cloned you, let's say for argument's sake, 10 times. It doesn't matter if it's 10, 100, 1,000. Now, your clones would grow up physically, and they would have their own personalities and their own memories, but they will only have the memory of one single life. That means to say that they are outside the loop of creation because they have not come through the correct channel that you have come through. The big debatable question is, when you die, you will return, I hope, and I know you will return back to source. Your clones, however, we have to use theoretical content here, may not be strong enough, or their signature will not be strong enough to enter the realm that you came from. And therefore, when they die, is it possible that their spark of awareness is not so much lost, but is in need of understanding? Now, the Greys themselves appear as clones, and they come through wars and doors. What if the Greys themselves had, cloned themselves to the point where they can no longer reproduce? And what are the Greys interested in? The Greys are interested in reproduction, human reproduction. They are interested in creating a new genus, hybrids that appear very weakly, or, it's almost as if they're trying to replicate or create a part of something that they are no longer part of. So is it possible that the Greys are creating, through this hybridization program, a new genus for their souls to enter? Now, let's just take another step here. When a person is being abducted, we can theorize that the astral part of the person is being matched by the field frequency density of the Greys, and they're brought within their field frequency of awareness. So there is a platform, i.e. the UFO. The Greys, when you physically interact with the Greys, it will be physical because you're matched by their vibration level. Rather like TV signals, if you were matched to them, you'll be in that show, in that pre-recording or a live transmission. It will be real to you. And whatever they do to the astral part, which is real to them, will affect invariably the physical body because the soul is still attached to it. That's why people come back sometimes with implants or marks on their body. So the big question for me is, what are the Greys interested in? Now, I do know that Dr. David Jacobs, I had met him in Arizona, believes that the Greys are creating a new race to take over the world. I am not disputing that. But it's interesting to speculate why a species that cannot create want to create. And this may open the argument again of the gods in the past of creating man. But I'm just finding it very odd that the Greys then, when they bring about this hybrid and the female abductee is brought back onto their ship, their craft, to bond with it, to show the hybrid love and human understanding, the essential ingredients that make you and I and billions of people on this planet what we are, and something the Greys seem devoid of. It's almost as if the Greys are a blank canvas. They don't understand about love, of taste, of smell, of affection. They're very clever at integrating within the mind of an individual, extracting memories, creating fear or scenarios, almost as if they want to build some kind of response that they can learn from or experience from. So it is interesting that we're dealing with, an extraterrestrial species, which is more interested in reproduction for a species that themselves cannot reproduce. And I know that you have arguments, which I don't really get into, with the mantis and reptilians, although I did see 3 reptilians, dare I mention it, when the experience happened, but they didn't really do much to me at all. They were just there as observers. But I believe that there is more to the abduction phenomena and more than just the UFO phenomenon that we're seeing, because both aspects, one is physical and the other comes on a very psychic integration of individual consciousness. So that's probably why a lot of people go through varied experiences with the creatures themselves. As I said, this is only speculation, and cannot be proven, but we have to think outside the box. And as I said before, Kevin, I'm open to all forms of speculation, but, you get some people who will slam you down and say, you are wrong. And well, that may be the case, but, we have to think outside the box, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting hypothesis. I mean, I would have thought if it was sentient, if it was organic, then who knows, one day, even if it was robotic, you could maybe have consciousness come into it, but God knows, right? But if it's organic, then even if it's a clone, then I would have said that there'd be some soul that wants to come down and say, I want that. You know what I mean? I want that experience.
Oh, yes. And also, we have to understand that, what I've spoken about is only a small part of what I've written about. There are many other, parts to it that are possibilities. I mean, when we came into being, were we, first of all, a blank canvas before we were created? The same with the Greys. We have to look at that. The Greys could even be remote viewing, but creating some form of biological body in order to carry their consciousness across the vastness of space. That is also a possibility. But but also the idea of a robot interconnecting with sentient life and also with reproduction is kind of tricky. I'm not saying it's impossible, because we have to be open to all forms of speculation, but certainly the reproduction and the cycle of that, the Greys are interested in, sniff suspect. And, even if they're wanting to create a new genus to inhabit another planet, that is a possibility. We don't know, but it's just something that I felt needed to be explored on a theoretical level, at least.